you're looking at the clock, that's not the job for you. And I've never since that first job ever, you lose track of time. And that's, I think that's, if I could give anyone good advice, that's I think the best advice I could give anyone starting a career is that if you're looking at the clock trying to figure out how much of your days left, you got to get out of that work.
Hello.
Hey, Joel. It's a very nice office setup you got.
Yeah, check it out.
It looks great.
Wall. This is fake.
It looks good. It's I was looking at a wall like that in the wood, but it looks real as can be.
I know Jake made it, our producer. It was quite. It's actually foam. It's like foam with wallpaper on it.
It looks great. I've been reading your book, the one with the lion. Yeah.
What do you think so far?
It's very good. And I was going to say this in our discussion. When I heard the first time I heard CTO, I was like, "What is that?" And I Googled it, and there was nothing. So thankfully, you have a book now to describe what the role is and how you can get advice if you're told you could be a CTO someday. So yeah, I think you did a great service to help everyone.
Thank you. When I saw, I had done a Google search for CTO books before I wrote it, and there was like nothing. So there were 2 or 3 books, but they were written like a long time ago, and they were not very good. And so I was like, all right, let's just try to, rather than try to be an expert on the topic, I was more so like, let's just share what I know and be as real about it. But it was interesting. I learned a lot from writing it, because people expect 2 different things. Like half the world expects instructions, right? And then the other half of the world like stories and understanding. So what happened was it got like 5 stars and was doing really well because it was just selling within like referrals and people. But then it got popular enough on Amazon to people were buying it to try to like understand the CTO role from like, they're just interested in learning, and they were upset that it wasn't written that way. So it's like making software or building a product or a company. Like your first iteration of it, it's out there and you kind of like hate it a little bit.
Well, and that's a good sign because you grew so much since then, and you know how to improve it. It's interesting because the first time I looked at it, my first question is, this role, and everything I could find was comparing CTO versus CIO. That was the only information I really could discover. So that the fact, that you took the sole focus on what a CTO is and what the job entails and how to be successful at it, that's, I think a unique position, unique view. So I think you can help a lot of people.
Yeah. And then it's also changed because I can't remember how many interviews I'd done before the book released. I think it was like 50, but we're close to like 400 now. I think like 230 or something have been released, and I have learned so much more. So I was trying to figure out like how to structure the next book and all of that. But I see you, look at all that music. You're in your music room.
It's properly best described as my kids' music room. My kids are really big into music, and I've always liked the idea of music. I love music, but to learn it, so I'm starting to take lessons myself. But I'm an amateur. I don't even know if that qualifies.
So who's into it? Which kids?
My son is 15 now, so he's been into it probably 10 years. Started with the piano, got into guitar and drums. So he's that natural curiosity bleeds into both my kids. My daughter's more into singing, so yeah. So when the whole COVID thing started, I had to take over the room because it was a nice, it's sequestered in the basement. I can close off the doors, and they can't hear me. I can't hear them. So yeah. But it's been a problem because they have to schedule their music time. But it's been nice because it's a nice distraction during the day. To get a few minutes, you can try to learn something. So.
And so you usually have like offices in the city that you're in for your company?
We do. So I'm in the southwest suburbs of Chicago, and our office is more centrally located in the Chicagoland area. So when we chose an office for, that's interesting as a part of the story. The first 10 years I had no office, and it was when my business partner joined me, we decided, it probably makes sense that we should get an office for everyone to come to. So we mutually agreed it should be in the middle, so it's painful for everyone. No one is going to be in their backyard. Coincidentally, I don't think there's one person that lives near our office. So it's a centrally located suburb, and so we all have about a 30-minute commute. But most of us have not been there since March. So it's been a real interesting, transition to do everything remotely, as I'm sure all your all your guests are telling you. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, what is the typical CTO look like? Is it typically a developer? They come from that source, or are you seeing that change over time where it's not the case? Or because I'm curious about how I came into being in the role, and if it's a typical path or if it's a little atypical. And I can describe a little bit about the
Yeah,
path
tell me
and
how you
about the
came into the
company.
role.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a little funny because I'll get there and I'll try to make a concise version. But I started comp sci in college. Went to University of Iowa, where I grew up. My first job offer I got at Motorola in Chicago, and I think you have a lot of connections at the Chicago,
I do.
the Motorola Mobility. I think I was looking at your profile, and so we probably have some common groups that we worked with. But I worked within the very first group of Motorola's. They called the RNSG group, and that group actually was the very first group that was experimenting with digital. So at the time, you probably don't know this company. It's probably before you start working, but it was a company called Nextel, and their big thing was you click the button. It was like a walkie-talkie, but it was a
Are you
digital.
kidding me? Nextel?
You remember
Yeah,
Nextel?
come
All
on.
right.
That was like the phone. We got cell phones in high school. That's like when people
Okay.
started getting, like
Yeah.
when phones started hitting the market really big
Yep.
for
Okay.
consumers.
Good. Good. So you remember the term. So that group actually literally came from the group. It was a small group, about 15 people. I was in factory support. The group, if I remember correctly, was called IDEN, Integrated Data Enhanced Network. And the big idea then was they were trying to compress the data, and they were having a lot of problems with the sampling being very choppy. This is back in 94. So that's how I got exposed to the data center idea, supporting computer systems, and got exposed to an application. At the time, it was red hot, white hot even, in the market, called SAP. It's a very large multinational, application, actually largest ERP in the world. Competes with Microsoft and Oracle. So at that time, learned large computer systems. Had the opportunity then to get a job at SAP itself, and I worked there for 2 years. Had really great experience getting mentorship from Proterra. He actually still been moving up in SAP, still there. Very grateful for all the things I learned about just becoming a technical consultant and what's important with working with large enterprises. Because really that was essentially my first interaction was Motorola supporting customer systems and then going out and recommending how to build systems and upgrading them and such. It was quite a different challenge. So I think that was one of the big things looking back, just being grateful is that mentoring, having people that help you and guide you, not just the textbook guidance. And today you have Google and you can look on the internet to get advice. Back then that didn't exist, but just the fact that you have someone guiding you saying, I found this to be successful, and, showing you the path, essentially showing you the shortcuts. That then in 98, so I started the company 22 years ago, and it was coming up to our 22nd anniversary in October of 98. Said, put out the signpost, they say, started the company, just, had it natural integration. And interesting, I've always interested about this idea of doing business. And I figured at the time, I wasn't married yet, didn't have children. I thought this is the time, if any time in my life, this is the time to try it. So gave it a try in 98, started just doing computer consulting for the first year or two, fell into over time, started doing full cycle implementations for 3 companies. Kohler Company, which does the fixtures up in Wisconsin. They have a lot of sinks and bathroom appliances. All this, a great company, been around for over 100 years. Kimberly-Clark, which is the Kleenex people, and then Rockwell Automation, which same company that did all the great stuff in the 60s and 70s with NASA and the Apollo programs. So worked it with them in up to 2005. So that was basically the first 10 years of the business. I'm sorry, 2008. Around that year, then I had a chance encounter with a guy I met in my very first job, and his name's Dita Amopoulos. He is now our CEO, and he asked, "Hey, you interested in doing business together?" He just recently sold a company at that time to IBM, and was looking to get back in the market just a couple years after that happened. So we started out just doing technical consulting. So I should mention, I hired my first employee over those first 10 years, and it was basically the 3 of us, him, myself, and my wife, for the first 10 years, just trying to keep the lights on, just trying to keep busy, doing consulting for those 3 companies. Totally grateful for that. So just keeping the company profitable and keep it possible for the future. So in 2008, had the chance to join up with Dean. He's still our CEO, as a partner, and we then focused on managed services. And at that time, we wanted to see how we could expand off just technical consulting and go into managed services, taking care of computer systems. This is pre-cloud. So at that time, we actually bought our own hardware, had servers. At the time, these were about $30,000 to install a sizable SAP system. Frank, it's a sort of funny story. The very first time I heard about VMware, and this is, the frank, real story is, we were doing a migration for a company, and I got an image of a VMDK image. I had no idea what it even was. I had literally, at the time Google existed, found out that this is an image, and you can import this file to build a system. So that was our first foray learning VMware, and we supported that system through this POC, moved them into our data centers, and we continued that business for the next 3 years. So always, one of the things that Dean and myself always been very important to us is bootstrapping it. So we've always built it as we could, as we could prove that we could get into a new area of the business, expand it, so it's all been organic. So that's been, literally the first, until about 2011, at which that time, and I should mention we had the hiring is a big concern always, growing the business. What's the next resource? Where should you budget and spend the money, capital allocation in that? And so we focused, our first actual executive that we hired to build out a team is around sales. And I'm a technical person, so seeing that part of the business was very new to me, understanding, okay, you got to invest in the sales part before you can build the delivery part. So our first key executive hires were around sales with Sam, and he's still with our company, and also then with our technical solutions in the pre-sales part with Carl. So that was about almost 10 years ago that they joined, and we just continue to innovate and build that managed services and the hosting business. So then getting into 2011, that was probably one of our biggest transformation moments, and that was when AWS was introduced to us by SAP themselves. And at the time, the idea was SAP was looking at the cloud providers that they could basically certify their application to go into the cloud. And that was a big transition, and still is. It's one of our biggest areas that we help customers with, is the complexity of moving those applications in a public cloud. So we were introduced and invited to help write technical documentation and do the testing around moving these systems and what that idea of hybrid cloud, integrating their existing on-premise environments to this cloud environments. So that took a good 6 months, and that really started the transformation of our company to go from this on-premise world into cloud. And that's where we've been really since the last decade. So that's last 10 years, we've been moving companies in the private to public cloud from on-premise, as well as, around that journey in 2014, we saw this need for doing it a better way. Like the big aha moment was, we have 2 experts, they go out on a customer site, it takes them a week to assess it and then start moving these systems. And we quickly saw that, it's just not going to scale. So that's where, the necessity is the mother of invention, that phrase that, hey, we got to do something different. And that's where the idea of development came in. That first it was with scripting, and then it was, there's a better way. Let's look at some Java ways that we could, the programming integrate, maybe create an application to do this. And that's where we started to build the dev team. So that's the full circle that's when I got introduced the idea of being a CTO, because at that time the role was building new technologies, taking what exists in the market and making it special for the SAP customers themselves, and creating things, if they didn't exist, looking at how we could do that ourselves. And so that was really where I was introduced back into the idea of doing development. I did it in college, did a little bit my first job, but it was almost 20 years later. So I think it's a little atypical path, because then it's, the CTO idea, that's when I was saying, when I had to Google what the CTO role is, because I was like, I'm not sure what this role is that I'm performing. And come to find out, it's, that role of innovation, building product, continually, basically being the spokesperson or evangelist for the technology in your company. That really is all parts of that CTO role. So that's sort of the long story of how I got to the role and learning about it.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. Like earlier I was like, well, it's really hard and nuanced, but if I do take like a step back, those items you mentioned are very, very common within the CTO role. But I always like to take the opportunity to pull people away from the title, because here's the trap you get into, right? You get into what is you search for the information on what's this responsibilities of this role, right? But what you don't get in those responses back is a detailed breakdown of the different stages of that role. Because what you're going to be doing at CTO when you have 10 people is different than when you're at 10,000 people. And so you've got this moving target, and you've got all these people, this entire spectrum of people searching for this one answer. And then for many of those people, or for at least a portion of them, what they're going to get back isn't necessarily aligned with where they're at currently. Right. So then if they tried to go implement these roles and they were trying to do things that a CTO at maybe 10,000 people are doing, when they have 10 people, they might be completely off spinning their wheels. So I always try to bring the opportunity, or I always try to use this as an opportunity to bring it back to, I guess I could come up with a better definition, is that they would like, and I'll work on this outside of the podcast, outside of this conversation, but it would
It's in the new book.
Yeah, it's in the new book. You would have to do it on principles, right? You would have to say that there's like principles to it. And then one of those things would have to be understanding what the organization needs today, and then being able to fill that in. So I would say a good CTO would even be able to identify that there's a lack of sales and install a salesperson, sales side of the organization. For me, when you were saying that, man, I identified so closely with you, Patrick, because my previous experience was building contract applications. So I'd build something for 2 or 3 years, sell it, and make good money and have a team, but I never operationally ran a business. And when I have been doing it, not understanding what an expert in sales looks like, what a pipeline looks like, what the whole world of sales, like not understanding how that looks on like a day-to-day thing was the thing I would go back 10 years and tell myself. I'd say, go find someone who loves technology as like the way you love technology. Find that person in the sales world. Find the salesperson who obsesses and loves best practices in sales and reads all the books and understands and just really cares. And that's like, they're driven to do their sales thing. Because now my business is still small, we're under 15 people, but there is nothing stopping us to getting to like $1 billion, like huge organization, because what it is these basic principles that you lay a solid foundation, and then you create an environment where it can kind of grow. And and you're limited by your market cap. So as long as you're in a place where the market cap is there, like you're aware of your market opportunity, then you can just keep growing that system. But it sounds like when you were describing those first 10 years, it sounds like if you could have gone back and talked to yourself, you would have got that salesperson a lot faster.
Absolutely. Because you see it from that technical viewpoint. And I think that's, it's the hang up, not just for CTOs, it's human growth in general, because you don't know what you don't know. And so I think I've learned it's very important, especially in product, that you look for the flaws, you look for critical feedback, and you seek that out. You want to understand what doesn't work for people, especially, just always want to have opportunities and learn that frank feedback on how you can improve, and not as yourself, but also for products and development. But yeah, do you see, talking to CTOs, that one path that, it was a struggle for me, and I see that in professional development around with IT people, especially, that they want to know everything themselves, and willing to give away ownership of those other pieces, and while they grow, and to understand they have to give that up to be able to get to that next level. And I see that working with IT people, especially, and maybe it's not in other disciplines, but
I'm getting goosebumps right now.
Yeah.
That's, for me, that's the thing I'm very self-aware of. Like my big issue that I'm always paying attention to is not trying to understand 100% of everything. Cause I think also my consulting work that I'd done basically, for those 10 years, essentially going into a business, completely wrapping my mind around how it works, and then building them applications to serve them better. I had this like need to wrap my mind around all the details, because what I was doing and getting paid for was very important and detail oriented.
Right.
Yeah. So what I notice now is I'm always just hyper aware of that, like letting go of things, delegating. And what I found that the trick is there, because it wasn't working for me for a while, I just kept cycling through people and not being able to do it. You have to find the person you trust.
Yeah.
And then
For
once you
guides.
realize, like, because when you find that person for the first time, when you find them, you feel okay. You don't worry about
Right.
it. You're just like, they're going to
Yeah.
hit that goal, and they go
Yeah.
for it. And so it took me 10 hires to find my salesperson.
Mm, right.
Almost 3 years and 10 hires. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's, it's one of the things that we think a lot about is how to measure. I mean, KPIs are very important. What are the KPIs? You could, in sales, it could be very simple because it's about closing. You could measure it that way, but it's also when the KPIs aren't being met, how can you help guide resources? And those are conversations, I had even this week with our team on, and it's a different answer for different resources. Some might need more guidance. Some might need more accountability, more check-ins to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And that's sort of the magic of the managing of the people part, which I'm still learning. So it's
How do you track your business processes? Like the
yeah.
routines that occur that are responsible for generating revenue or delivering on the revenue you generated?
Yeah. The business process monitoring, that idea. So defining the business process, first of all, is obviously very important. Making sure that people are trained and understand it. And it's hard. I mean, I really underestimate how hard it is to change people's behavior.
Right?
It's extremely hard because even when people know it's the right thing to do, and and the great irony is, the experts are the hardest because they know it so well, a process, that they usually can do it much faster than when you try to automate it. And so trying to give an automated tool that can be replicated, do it 1,000 times, and it'll be vastly improving the process in the future. It's extremely hard to give a tool and give it to the expert first. I've found it's actually better to build a tool with an expert, understand that business process, and then give it to someone seen it for the first time to actually be able to test it and implement it and start getting the groundwork laid within the team to start using it. So because the people with new eyes are seeing it for the first time, they're not going to question it. Obviously, it has to be designed properly in the first place. So I'm sort of jumping ahead, but my conclusion, and I'm not saying it's the best answer, it's not the right answer, but the best answer I've come up with so far is actually putting that into software, because it actually forces the method to be done and to be followed. And that's where one of the aha moments, and I might say this and it might be a very simple observation, but it really hit me the very first time, building software. And well, I should say first time, but the first time it hit me was we really struggled on this feature, and it took us probably 2 months in design. It looked very simple when we got into it, and we just kept getting this rabbit hole, kept getting more complicated. And it was a little discouraging because, at the time it's like, is it even worth building this? Maybe we should just move on. And then it hit me that this very, very complicated feature is going to be a button. And that problem's only fixed once. You create the button and then it's fixed permanently. And then it really hit me the power of what, building the software, what it is, and the software is literally, it's taking this, encapsulating this expert knowledge from people in different disciplines, and in this case is on migrations to cloud, and capturing that from a person that's done it. Well, collectively, the team working on it's had over 100 years in this area, for cloud migrations. They've been doing it for decades, for before cloud. Capturing that, putting in the software, and now this becomes something that everyone can apply and use. And that's when it really hit me that that power of what software really is. It's the encapsulation of that intelligence, and being able to pull that virtual expert at any time, in the software. So that's when it really hit me of the power. And as Mark Andreessen said, probably 10 years ago, software is eating the world. It really started. I started to understand the power, really what's possible there. So, and that's
Yeah.
got me more excited.
Yeah, and it reminds me of kind of what we were with the business processes. So like there's creating a new business process, which has to be done. Normally it's like done manually at first before it's
Mm-hmm.
automated. And then that's like a process you go through. Okay, you have to go to the scientific way of like, I'm going to try 10 things to solve this problem. I'm going to try one or two things. I'm going to test the results, find the best solution, and then run that. And then once we've confirmed that this is the, good enough to solve the problem, move forward, then we can begin to like automate it and refine it.
Mm-hmm.
But going through those stages with a team, well, first of all, it's very difficult. Like it's not for a regular employee or an individual contributor
Right.
often. It's usually a
Yeah.
very special type of person that understands It's going to be very difficult. There's going to be a lot of changes. It's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to put time into something and then you're going to feel like it was useless. And then you're going to get a little bit better and learn. And then you're finally going to boom, get the result. And you're going to feel fantastic after a lot of difficulty. And then you're going to figure out how to automate that, refine that. And then you're going to hand it off like it's your child. And you say goodbye, go off into the world. And then you're going to start all over again. And those are the most valuable people. Those are the most valuable people.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. The observation. And I think part of the struggle you may encounter, I've seen this, is that when you're trying to build a business process, maybe someone doesn't have the full view of that process, or maybe they do, but they don't see how it integrates with other processes. So you have this analogy in the book where you try to, the object-oriented approach to problem solving, where you try to keep it separate, keep it simple, and it only interacts with its neighbor. And it's sort of that, to build a business process that can rely upon the next piece, and and keep it simple, but still have it where it can be integrated into a larger whole. And to have people that can see those big pictures. I don't think it's a IQ necessarily issue, or people that can't think on that level. It's just, I don't think people get exposed to thinking that way in general. It was interesting. There was a comment, one of the gentlemen I worked with in the past, and we were doing demos. And one of the things that I struggled a lot, and I don't have an answer for it yet, but we sort of, just through maturity and through years, we got past the problem. And that was when you try, you have an idea how the software is going to look and how it should be presented, when you demo and when you want to just present the idea. And it was a big challenge because we were trying to describe, there's this missing piece, and we're trying to describe how it works. And I felt really strongly that I should have some way to be able to prototype it, because over the years, so many times I wanted to become a Java stack programmer so I could get in there and help the team, but I keep reminding myself that's not the right idea, right? You gotta hire those people and keep focusing on the design piece. But still going back to the prototyping, it's been a big challenge. And the saying I heard, which I think is very true, is people have lost the capability for imagination, where they can't visualize it. They literally have to see the screen painted to be able to understand what you're describing. And I think that abstraction, when you're building software and application, how you're connecting these pieces together, I think it's same application here for this business process, where people just can't see the value of putting these things together. And I think there's another thing related to it, and how people think, and that is, I think people naturally always think, this opportunity cost idea. Maybe they don't understand the economic term, that if you're doing something, you can't do something else. But I think people sort of naturally think that way. And where I'm going with it is, there's always this bargaining. Like, okay, you want to have this way where you're going to automate a sales order to go, go through some logic and automatically update this team, or there's some notification, but there's always this bargaining of, is that really the most important thing we should be focusing on? And I think there's a lot of internal strife even on that piece of prioritization. And I think our team, myself, I should say, lack of leadership in that area in the past, I didn't do a great job prioritization, understanding, here's a story points, this is the cost of this to go now do this immediately. And that's something I think our team has become a lot better on. And we just had a meeting this morning going through a story points for the next sprint prioritization. And it's like, this one, we're going to move this one up 5 story points, we're going to have to, take these other ones down. And so I think that's just the understanding, and the people understanding, the team members understanding the prioritization and honoring that, and, seeing the big picture. I think that's a challenge.
Yeah. The best way I have found to prioritize is distance to revenue. That's the best way. So I'm how far away is what I'm doing? How far away is this project, or what's the result of this project? Like, what's the value of having done this? Like, let's say it's done and we have that item. What's that one bullet point? And then how close is that to revenue?
Yeah.
Because you can have, it's so easy to come up with ideas. It's like so
True.
easy to think of things.
Yeah.
Your customers will backlog you for infinity with ideas, and then they have different ones, are more popular than others. But the one thing I have found to be so true after doing it right and wrong is that the sales have to come first. The sales have to come first, because that's conversion of your idea into marketplace value. And it's like the most important thing.
Absolutely. So there's a saying, I'll say it, and I always think of this when that term comes up, and you know Buck Rogers from that term, but our salesperson Sam says, without bucks, there's no Buck Rogers. And if you don't bring in sales, you can't pay for the technical resources, the Buck Rogers to do the work. So it is the question: is it harder to sell the service or harder to deliver the service? And that's a very good debate, or build the service. But same idea. So yeah, it's a never-ending quest for us to get the right answer. If I can ask you, how do you measure if there's a tangible revenue? Is that customer request that you know of that will turn into sales, or is it you have a good feel that that's going to translate into new purchases? Is that something that you can quantify?
Yeah, so it depends. It's very like context specific. So you can get more or less creative with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I watch myself try to get like creative and beat my own system, right? Because you could say, all right, well, this customers, they need this feature, and they're like our top customers, like they make up a large portion of our revenue. And this is something that the decision maker specifically is like needs, and it's feels like that they might move away if they can't get this, because they don't just want this feature because it's Tuesday. They want this feature because it's impacting their operations.
Right.
And so it's really more about the exercise of creating a team that can think about value and justify it. And so they're like, all right, here's what I've prioritized. And then I want to train them to I'm not going to give them the answer. Show me the priority list based off of the principles that we have and the training that you have here. Now stand behind why this is number one.
Right.
And then I put it on them. So I get my team to really always be thinking about value, because my job is to create an autonomous organization that can scale without my existence. Right. Mm-hmm. So if I die, my family still has money and all of this type of stuff. Very important to me. So like,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I'm in the process of like thinking about.
And building the dev teams, do you have opinions on size, how many members, and then creating basically replicating that group with the same roles?
Yeah, so Team Topology is a book, and it's like one of my favorite books on the structure and organization of teams. Have you come across that one yet?
I have not. I'll look it up.
Yeah. So I'm not
so
quoting
8 to 10. Is that about the size?
Well, do you mean per direct report?
Or even
per leader?
If you're looking at the team and have them even work on different applications, or I'm not sure how the work would be distributed, but is that the team size of roughly 8 to 10 to 12 people? Is that what you've seen yourself to be value?
Well, the way I do it, my like rule of thumb is 1 to 5. So I'll have like one person managing 5 people.
Okay.
And then I'll let it spread out from there. So I break it up like that. I found it's been very useful, because the team member, and earlier I was wrong, by the way. I had said that person that can do that processing that I described, creating and editing and deploying them and delegating them, that I said that they were the most valuable. That's probably the wrong word. They're very valuable, but what I meant was they're the most rare. Like the least amount of people are willing to do that, spend their time doing that. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Do you have any like I'll call it shared resources that are over teams, like UI designer? Would you have a UI designer in each team and backend in each team, or a tester in each team? Or do you have roles that would cross over the teams?
Great question. So it's all based on, like, I look at the business and I let the business tell me what to do. So if you're like a services business, I would probably see in services business where the small teams are like the client's experience is essentially interacting with this group of 5 people, right? An account manager, engineer, something like that. So if you have something more like that, you would probably have your team structured in that way. If you're a product company and you just have one, like your Uber, you're going to have your team structured differently.
Features.
Features, services.
Have the team members can float to different groups over time to get cross training and such. I've heard about the models in the big companies. That's great.
Well, they do that to retain. They do that to reduce recruiting costs and keep their people inside the ecosystem. I mean, it's a smart business move.
It is, and people like it. I mean, I'm talking to people that've been exposed to it, so it's a good model.
Because people like to. Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
When I'm at 5,000 people, we can have this conversation again.
Yeah. We'll do part 2.
Part 2, yeah. We'll do it sooner than that, though. I'm sure you're a pretty great guy. I really I really enjoy the way
Likewise.
that you think.
Well, and so I'll ask the question. So do you think the CTO, if someone came to you and said, I want to be CTO, do you have feelings of, there's obviously things they have to learn, but do you think there's characteristics in that person that they would need, or they won't be happy in that job, or they won't be successful? Do you think,
Yeah.
think
Okay. So
that's,
yeah. So general rules of like thumb things I'm looking for in people that are CTOs, I'd
yeah,
say desire and persistence are probably the like two prerequisites to having success, right?
right.
Because you have to want to do this, and then you have to continue to do it when it gets difficult. So
Absolutely.
those are, I
Absolutely.
would say, those are like foundational elements that are required.
Hmm.
In order to do it. Then after that, if we're going to go into more skill-based stuff, I would say immediately begin working, even if you think you are great at communication, immediately begin working on communication, because everything that you want to do in life, you're going to have to communicate to other people to get it done, whether that's to get money for it or to get them to actually execute on it. So getting your ideas from that crazy floaty space up in your head, right, our imagination, out into a vision and then instructions and executables, and how do you communicate, how do you convert your thoughts into uh, things that other people can understand and take action on.
Hmm.
That's a
So as
hard
it,
thing to do.
well, you said a word that really triggered, and that was the creativity part of the job. And I would, creativity slash that endless curiosity, just being curious, period. I think that's a
Curious, yeah.
big part to the job, or that to make you successful in the role, at least. Because it's IT in general, I guess you could argue that it's every day there's, you got to continually learn, or else you're going to be obsoleted. I think it's even hyper, focused in the CTO role, because you're trying to stay on the future, not even what's current, what's going to be 2 years from now, what's going to look like. And so that natural curiosity is, it's not a job. It's that, you're doing it regardless of the role.
Yeah, and as hard as we could make it seem, right? Because you have to have good focus, you have to have discipline, you have to have curiosity, you have to have some sort of ability to contribute early or have some sort of deeper level knowledge, and you have to have at least mastered one area, right?
That was one of the other things I wanted to mention about you're becoming an expert SME essentially. And you said there's a lot of different types of CTOs, where you think of like a CFO, they literally have a book that you learn how to do accounting. There
I
is a
know.
right way to do accounting, and in IT is not like that in general. But even the CTO, you could argue, might not be IT, might be more in science. Where you have to be you have to be close to an expert, if not expert, in a specific area to be successful.
Yeah, I was actually I was surprised because we have like CFO, like not a full-time one, just like contract. And I was talking with him and he was like, "Oh yeah, he kept referencing his license." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Oh, it's like a doctor. Like it's a very real thing, and these standards, these accounting things
Yep.
cross the entire economy, right?
Yeah.
So like gap accounting is gap accounting, right? It's
Gap
it's
accounting,
not
and
it's not this way in engineering.
it
There's a
isn't.
million different ways to do it.
Yeah, and the one area in IT is like it, and it really, this is another aha moment, is security, because security has a right way. They have the certifications, and you're either compliant or not. And because those are usually our toughest calls, I would say, from a standpoint of, because we're used to giving customers options of how we can do a migration, how you can do an install, how best to lay out the design. That's the taps in that creativity part, in IT. Yet securities, there's clearly a right and wrong way to do it. There is options, but that's been our hardest meetings, I would say, with customers, where there's a specific way they want it done. And even when we usually defer as the customer option, the security team says, no, it has to be exactly compliant to this. And it really hit me that is one area, sort of the exception in IT, that there's clearly, this, you could say, law of how to do it. So that's, anyway, it describes why that is so difficult. Because you
Yeah,
got to do
there's
it the
like
one right way.
yeah, and there's a couple popular. There's like the OWASP, and there's a couple different like frameworks out there. I actually talked to this really interesting guy yesterday from a company called Security Scorecard. And so what they do is, I think I always like to see like, what are you going to be doing? Like, what's the crazy big vision far out? And the crazy big vision far out is essentially they're going to be like the credit karma or like the credit scoring of security. They're a large company today, but like they basically give you this, you could put in any company name and it'll tell you their security. So the idea is that, you have
Mhm.
your own security, but you also want to understand like your
Sure.
vendors that you
You
use and
can
their
trust.
security.
Yep.
Yeah. So
And
I was like,
open up.
I want to, yeah.
Yeah, I can completely see the need for it. It makes a lot of sense. I see similar, even within your security profile of they talk about digital money someday. You will have a security profile of yourself and who, if you want to transfer money, it'll be the exchange between those two security trusts, you could say. So it's a big area, and I also think just trust within online communities. It's both my children, my daughter is 12, my son's 15. Just my daughter's on social media, and it's just the etiquette, I would say. I'm being nice, but just how the social trust in that is pretty low, where pretty much anything can be said to anyone. And so I think that's going to be something they talk about regulation in the future. That's one of the things that this Netflix show I referenced earlier talked about. It seems
What
like
was the
that.
title of it?
I can't remember it. I apologize. It just
That's
came
all right.
out like in the last day.
Okay. So if I
I
search
can't
like
remember.
social media, social engineering, Netflix,
I think
was it documentary or story or?
it's a documentary. Yeah. They go into the phrase you probably heard, but it's very true. And they explore it. Is basically, if the service is free, you're the product. So that explores that. And, it focuses primarily on the social media aspect, which, people use their phones for more than that. I myself don't use a lot of social media, but I certainly am on the internet a lot, not only for a job, but just, for going to buy something, you do a lot of research on there. So I don't think they really explore that part as much, but it's very thought provoking.
Did you buy
The
your
ethics.
Tesla on the internet? Or did you go to like a dealership or?
No, it's a funny story actually. I've been following them since like 2008. I think there was an Inc. magazine. I actually still kept it coincidentally, you know. So I knew about the company really early on, and I didn't get. I bought a used one in 2013, and they. I found a person on the internet. He scraped the website of Tesla, and it was just went live. So I signed up to be notified when things hit this price point, and it was like 40% of the original price. The car had a lot of miles on it, but when they started reselling the cars, they had this unlimited warranty essentially. So the car had 60,000 miles, but the warranty was going to be like 250,000 miles. So like, even if the battery, there's a lot of, this is in 2013, there was still a lot of questions about the battery, which it proved to be nonsense. It was good. The cars have been flawless actually. And um, the car was on sale for 8 minutes is my point. The guy had a ticker, it hit my qualification. So I didn't even see the car, but it was like buying some sight unseen. And yeah, I had that car for 2 years, and I put in the order for the 3, which is the big mass seller, biggest seller now, very successful. I pre-ordered that like the day, in 2016 when they announced it. So I've had that now for 2 years. It's an amazing car. The amazing thing about the technology, you can go into all the renewable energy part to it and all the great things. But I think one of the things that you don't hear anything about, people just don't talk about enough, is the simplified model of an electric car. So there's no maintenance. So all electric cars I've owned, I got one for my wife now, so the 2, and I traded this first one. So there's 3 total. Out of all those cars, I've done zero maintenance. The cost of ownership on the maintenance side is zero. So even the tires have not worn out yet. So
So there's
no
like, yeah,
oil,
because there's
no
no oil
maintenance.
changes. Yeah.
And that's, I think, when people understand that model, the cost of ownership is completely different. And the fact is, it's a lot cheaper to charge your car instead of getting gas. It'll be a really big boon. And I think that comes out word of mouth when you talk to someone, talk to your neighbor. It's like, yeah, I never go to the dealership. I talk to colleagues and they're like, oh, I got to take my car in for service. And I don't say anything, but I'm like, gosh, I don't miss that at all. I don't miss going to the gas station. It's just it's a different paradigm, different way. And when someone either does a test drive and they get an experience in it, it's just clearly a better way to do it. And that's tying it back to our job. I'd say, building products, building the software. I have a real more appreciation for brands actually now. It's actually, you're building, if you think of a brand, you think of an iPhone, how many thousands of people have worked on that phone to build this thing that is creates value. And I have a lot more appreciation for that now when you try to do that yourself and, be a part of a team that does that. So, I really appreciate that those companies that are pushing the envelope.
So are you guys like building software? Do you have a product or do you
Mm-hmm.
customize it? Like what are you doing right now with software?
So our product, it originally started, back in 2014 as a bunch of scripts and how we could automate it on a operating system level. And basically just very simply describing it, we would copy a database and move it to another location. So that's where it started. And then we could upgrade it. You could say, we'll upgrade the operating system and database at the same time and move to cloud. And now it's this transformation, the iteration, I should say, the improvement over time is it's an internet application. The customer can go on the internet, register themselves, and they can do an assessment. So there's quite a few cloud tools out there that can look at assessing a data center. So we do that piece, and we integrate with third-party products that do that. But we try to simplify it, and we try to focus especially on this SAP space, because SAP, largest enterprise application in the world, and it's just, there's over 100,000 customers just in the North America alone. So it's a very big space, and moving all those systems on premise to the clouds is going to be a big effort for companies in the next at least decade, maybe two. So that's what we focus on, is that transformation. So doing an assessment, helping them move the data, and doing transformations at the same time. So that's been really our main focus for the last 6 years. And then the part we've been focusing on the last two has been around the ops piece. Again, specifically for SAP systems. So looking at the performance, like so these systems are used for payroll, they're used for order management, they're used for all logistics. For example, some of our customers, Sony, we did migration for their systems, Sony Motion Pictures, into the cloud last year. Fitch Ratings, which is once you hear this name, you'll hear it when you hear news. If you think of Moody's, they do S&P review, like a debt rating of a company. Fitch Ratings does it for countries. So you hear Venezuela's debt's been downgraded. We did their migration, their SAP systems moving into cloud. That was actually our very first big one we did, and we did move it to AWS, Amazon Web Services. We upgraded it was an Oracle database into what SAP has, this new technology called HANA. They introduced about 5 years ago, in memory, and also we upgraded and changed the operating system. So we did all that concurrently. So we're trying to simplify that process, and it's not just coming up with a better answer, but it's more of using the tools that the vendors have provided and integrating that and making it simple, making it a simple, very clearly understood path. That's been really our focus, because the cloud transformations are just incredibly complicated to understand. All that has to move, project management pieces of it, all those. So we're trying to really focus on having a full answer for that piece.
So how are these, like, what are your normal customers or like average customers? What do they look like and how did they find you?
Great question. So we try to focus in the SMB space. That's where we can, for a company between $250 million up to $1 billion, that would be our focus. These are larger companies. SAP classifies small to mid-sized business, but up to $1 billion. So these companies running SAP as their core application, oftentimes they'll have a lot of other servers. And now, they're getting more into the serverless world. So a lot of the DevOps piece, they want to go to cloud because they want to activate that and integrate it with their existing applications. So that's about the size. So typically to move systems, we see the customer will have, let's say, 50 servers up to 500 servers. And so we got to manage the movement of those, and, make sure that happens timely without risk, and, manage it, and you communicate with their team very clearly of how it's going to be done, and cost effectively, I should say. So that's been the focus. The big focus now is then taking that operations piece and simplifying and making the data. I heard the term and I like it. It's a good description of surfacing the data. So taking the data that all the operational aspects, the performance of the system itself, and then getting into the part that you mentioned on business processes. So these companies, very critical processes of sales order entry. How long does it take to enter an order? How long does it take for their HR to be processed, their payroll every week. So those are metrics that we'll track, and then we actually can show that through our application so they can see it real time and track it over time. So it's, as you said, it does understand that full process and being different, that's been the challenge. So we want to give flexibility and prioritization to the customer to say, hey, we want you to build this next. That's been our new challenge, because a lot of what we've built, I'd say for the first 4 years of the application has been more homegrown. Okay, we anticipate this is what customer wants. And then it's been a whole next level when getting it in the customer hands and they say, this is the thing we want to show. I'll just describe a real simple answer, a real simple example of that. So we built a screen that shows CPU, memory, and disk utilization over the app and the performance of the application itself. So we correlate that and design that, and show that to a few customers. And then one customer had the insight, it'd be really interesting if you could show me that data, but plot not only the system that's receiving the data, we call it the ERP system, the Intersource Resource Planning system, show me the BW system, the analytics system, and the exchange of data and how performance correlates between the two. And so that's been just a really nice, seeing it from the customer view and asking those, or getting that feedback of how to build new features and extending it. So that's been a great value. So when I asked the question, that's where I was, that was the reason I was asking the question about the revenue generating features, because that's where we clearly see these are now customer requested features instead of ones that we think customers will want. So that's where we
I would have,
now.
When that person suggested that, right, to me, I would have been like, I would have found a appropriate way to ask how much like they would pay for it.
Right. Yeah.
Because everybody will say things are cool, but the real test comes with, all right, well, now hand me the money to go build it.
How much value is it going to give you? How much money will it save you? Yeah.
Yeah. Because you might find out that they're only willing to pay $1.99 a month for something that's going to cost you $50,000 to build, deploy, and maintain. And even if you sold it to all of your customers, that wouldn't be useful. So you would just have to find, because like we have to build. It's so weird, because like you hear it, but like you just have to build to what the marketplace is demanding and what they're willing to put out cash for. And I used to like be reluctant or like slightly resistant to that when I was earlier on in my product days, because I'm like, it's the craft of the product, and like I'm listening to all my product people and reading all the product books and understanding the engineering and the quality of the code. I'm like, it's all about that. And then I'm like, oh, that's a luxury. Like it can be all about that, but you can only have the time to focus on that if money is coming in from whatever value you're selling into the marketplace.
True.
And and then it becomes like this fun game of like, how much more useful can I be to the customer, because then we can get more money. And then that's when culture kicks in. And the only reason why we want more money is because we want to invite more people to this party, because we're having a pretty great party over here doing what we're doing. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's to measure that financial aspect to the features is incredibly hard, but it's essential to know where to prioritize. So it's that's been very hugely valuable, because that hasn't happened until very recently in our product. Because taking the idea about taking those experts and putting in the software, that's really been our guidance, because we've been doing this exact type of work for over 20 years. That's really been our guidance for the first 5 years of the product. And now we're transitioning more, and I should mention there's two big parts. One was the application primarily has been an internal tool up until the last year. And originally it was just a private, application that was behind our firewall. And now we've built it where it's SaaS. So it's one application. Customers ask if they can get it private, but we haven't had to do that yet. So and the reason I bring this up is that it's an interesting world, because we have this SaaS application, yet it integrates back into their company's networks. And so there's parts as an agent the work is performed as. And I think that's a really interesting space where things are going to go, with the serverless world, and how some of these services could be performed. In the past, it's had to be a server and you put it in your data center, or now you can put it in the cloud. But now, actually abstracting even that, now it's going to be this service that's in the cloud. I think that's hugely interesting of what's the limits, or where can we take that? So that's where we're exploring, for the software, to have something that's ubiquitous and, it's available this could be a little intimidating for software companies to hear, but it's hard to consume this idea, but you're paying, a few cents every time it's called, that world. And does that make sense as a model? So,
Well, I mean, that's like the whole cloud world, right?
yeah. Yeah. I mean, for calling for APIs, I should say, to qualify, but absolutely on demand. And
Yeah. I think
it's
the
a
whole world is moving to that. I think,
subscription based. Yeah.
yeah,
Interesting.
or
Yeah.
subscription or use based, because what it seems to be like, if you try to take a macro, I get weird. I ask questions like, what are the humans building and things like that. But if you take a step
Yeah,
back,
we software people, yeah, humans will operate this. I think outsiders hearing that is funny. Sometimes yeah, I agree. But yeah, the subscription based, the utility based model where you pay as you use, we see that.
yeah, margins tend to consolidate, right? Like things become service and then it's a race for price to the bottom. And then that just becomes like the standard and people stop reinventing over there. And then enough times pass. And then some new technology happens. And then someone goes and disrupts that old already consolidated market with some new value. It's like this
Absolutely.
interesting cycle that the market goes through.
Yeah. Uber, there's an interesting, Peter Diamandis, he came out with a new book this year, and he made the point about Uber. The ride sharing, applications they already say they're already going to be supplanted by autonomous driving. The taxis, they already know that. So that really, it's been a few years where that they're going to have a market. They know it's going to be supplanted by autonomous, taxis. And you think of that, of how fast the rate of innovation is happening now is
Oh
is
yeah.
quite startling. To keep the
Yeah. I mean,
perspective of how fast we have to innovate.
look at in China, I was reading about the different already existing autonomous taxi services. Apparently in Shanghai, you can just get one. They have an app. You press the button, the car comes and picks you up. And I think they had the article I was reading. It was either 1,000 or 10,000 of them had currently deployed today. And
Wow.
then they had I think it was like a few million by 2025 was like one company's goal. Cause there's, they have their own manufacturers,
Mm-hmm.
they have their whole own everything over there. But then you look at Tesla, and Tesla, I think that they have the one vision of Musk said on one of his interviews, he's like, imagine that you're in your car, you pull up, you're in your garage, you're not going to need the car the rest of the night,
Right.
and then your car goes and runs taxiing for other
Right.
people, and then you
Yeah.
get money from your car.
Yeah. And the I'll say it's probably considered a crazy statement. Yeah, this is a person that looks like he's going to get to Mars, right? So he has some interesting views that so far he's been pretty true to delivering what he says, even these crazy thoughts. I think one of the craziest thoughts, if it can come true, will totally upend, and that is, he's saying you buy a car today, it's going to appreciate over time, that you will actually make money off that by running it out, and that's going to upend how autos been priced for the last over 100 years, right? There's no depreciation, so that we'll see.
Well,
We'll
all
see
the
how
major car
that's possible.
companies, like next year, I think all the major car companies are coming out with like electronic versions of without like changing. Like there's going to be electronic Ford pickup truck, and it's going to look exactly like a Ford pickup truck, and just like another year newer. It's not going to be like what they were doing in the past, making the electric cars look all ugly, right?
Yeah.
They know that electric is where the
Yeah.
world's going.
And it's another point, and I think I really appreciate the move, taking having a company that wasn't based as a software company and becoming a software company, and the challenge in that. And I think the DNA of being a software company at the end of the day, they do make cars. At the end of the day, it seems that they're more of a software base, at least how they develop. Agile based, they're doing the releases over time, the over the air. Whereas it's going to be a hard transition, I think, for the auto manufacturers to become software companies, and that's clearly what's becoming a differentiator. Looking at autonomous driving, software is what enables that. So I think it's going to be a hard role. But I think GM did a big investment with Rivian. I think they're part owning, if I remember that correctly. So that they're seems like they're obviously up to the aware of their shortfalls and trying to bridge them. But I think
Yeah,
that's going to be a big one.
yeah. It seems like I heard GM did that, but I think they also is GM Corvette. I'm not like a
Yep.
huge All right.
Yep, Chevy.
So they took their Corvette team, which is technically like a separate brand. It's like the Corvette, or the way they were explaining it to me is like this Corvette teams that make those cars are kind of separate entirely from the rest of the inside the group. But they took the like best designers from those teams and put them on their electric line. And then I had the CTO Ford on when the whole COVID thing happened, because they're talking about how they did the started making the ventilators, right?
Yes,
When that was a
that's
big
amazing.
deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he told me about the new like Mustang that's coming out that's electric,
The
and then they
Mach-E,
also
I think it's called. Yep.
yeah, and then they also have all these other ones. But I saw inside of it, I think they all had a big wake up call. I think the whole industry had this big wake up call of what I think happened is I think they drove a Tesla. Because when you drive a Tesla for the first time, you're like, oh my goodness, this is
Yeah.
like a piece of Apple hardware on the road or something. It's just
Right. That's what they
beautiful and
said when they
amazing.
released it. It's like driving an iPad.
That's what they said. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it feels like. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a big transition. So yeah, the good news is it's going to be good for consumers. You know, it's going to be, I think it will drive prices of cars down because they're already getting economies of scale that's starting to come in. And obviously, you know, there's a lot of very talented people at Tesla, and they're starting to cross pollinate. They're going to other companies and they're taking a lot of best practices, you know. And in the past, I don't know if it's still the case, but a lot of those early patents were open sourced, so anyone could use them.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if that's still the case. Probably some of the newer things aren't, but
But
so
they want to sell their batteries.
yeah,
That's
and the
like the purpose of
drivetrains.
that, right?
Yep.
Yeah, the batteries. I
And
mean,
and possibly the sensor, the AI, like so. It's gonna be interesting. Yeah.
that's where they have the big advantage is the more data you have, and they've been collecting data. They probably have the most data, right? I don't think there's an electric car company that has more driving data than Tesla.
Probably, yeah. I don't know about Waymo and how they record it, and frankly, I haven't heard a lot about Waymo. The Google is part of Google. They were, you know, they're probably the closest, you know, second recording data, you know, back and mapping it. But I haven't heard much about them lately. So I agree. I think they have a clear lead there, and they're currently doing a whole rewrite of the code base. Supposedly, they're going to release it in Q4. So
Yeah, I saw that news article. I saw
yeah,
that, and then I saw Microsoft underwater data centers.
yes,
Those two things recently, and I was like,
yeah.
whoa.
The interesting thing about the data center, I thought the most striking, you know, because it's certainly it's great from a PR perspective, and everyone's like, why would you do that? But the most interesting observation out of that whole article I took out of it is the human factor, that it's forcing no one could touch the server. That's what they said is one of the best. Because I'm like, why would you do that? And certainly there's safer places in the world to put a data center, but you know, that was one of the biggest conclusions they said, is that the uptimes they found in servers, I don't know if it was the average mean uptime for all the systems there, were better because the human factor was minimized. You couldn't have someone go over and trip over a cable in the bottom of the ocean. So I thought that was the most interesting insight on that article. I also saw something, I can't remember the source, but they talked about it's a matter of time before they put data centers in space. So, or at least a semblance of a data center, maybe as much a smaller model. But you start thinking of, you know, the latency issues, and if we start having, you know, places on the moon, it might make sense because you want to have that compute closer to you. So it's an interesting thought.
That is true, because isn't it like plus 100, plus or minus 100 if you're on
Yep.
like the shadow part of the
Yeah, the latency.
moon?
Yes, at
Yeah.
the dark side. Yeah, and you probably know about Starlink, that
Oh yeah.
the latency is supposedly it's under 100 milliseconds, and I think that maybe it's better, and then I think the bandwidth is 100 megabit, which is just amazing. There's a lot of people, colleagues I have, that they could use that as a backup. You know, they're in not remote areas, but areas that just their broadband's not good. So
Yeah.
that could be incredibly promising.
Oh, I'm very excited about that. I was actually surprised. We were, every once in a while you get like everyone gets excited about a SpaceX launch. And then I thought the other day, I was like, how many SpaceX launches are actually SpaceX launches? They're happening a lot.
A lot.
They're happening like way more frequently than I had thought.
Yeah. Did you see the new launch? You got to take a look at it. It literally looks like a water tower launching up, and it doesn't, even from the perspective of space, it looks very, very large. You know, the largest new space rocket. I forget the name of it.
I think it's like the Star Hopper or something.
Yeah, it's
Hopper.
like that. They codenamed it BFR. That's not the real name.
Yeah,
But
I know. I love that name.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they couldn't go to press with that. But you got to see the video of it. It is truly impressive because you can tell this thing is just a massive, massive mass, an object to go up in space. I think it goes up about a mile and comes down. But it's truly impressive. And in that same day when they did that launch, they actually had another rocket launch that became routine to launch the Starlink satellites. Matter of fact, and you're right. It's become routine, which is a good sign. It's becoming reliable and low risk, and that's what we need for continuous innovation.
So that Star Hopper, I'm looking at it right now. Actually, hold on a second.
Is it called Star Hopper? I thought there was another name. It's part of the.
Is that it? Here,
it's let me see if I can dig it up really quick. That's not the name I'm remembering. It just happened. Yeah, let's see if you can bring it up. It is truly, truly impressive.
All right, let's see. SpaceX largest rocket.
Yeah, and do test.
Falcon Heavy. Our largest test rocket.
Yeah.
Because that Star Hopper thing looked really small.
You'll see this, and your first impression will be it's fake. No, it's let me get it here. Here it is. It's Starship.
Sure. Starship. All right, yep, so SpaceX.
Starship, and let's get the.
Oh my goodness.
You got to see the real test though.
This thing's
funny.
built?
I happened upon this, and now I can't find it when I'm legitimately looking for it.
Look at this. Here, can you see my screen? Is this it?
Yep, that's it. That's it.
That
they actually
looks
have video.
Ridiculous. It looks like an adult toy.
It's actually, where I found it? It's actually on the SpaceX Twitter feed. That's where it came in. So you got to see this because it's worth. Here it is. I found it. If you just go on YouTube and it's Starship SN6 flight test. It happened a little over a week ago. You swear it's photoshopped. You cannot believe this is a real thing.
100. Here's SN6. There it is. A minute.
Yeah, if you can put that one up. Yeah, and no one's talking about it. That's the amazing thing. There you go.
Is this it?
That's it. You got to put the sound on, can you?
It's on for me.
Oh.
But it'll be on, and we can put
good.
it on for the recording because it'll come in separately.
You got to see.
Look at this thing.
And when it initially launches, there's horizontal rockets keeping it, so it doesn't tip over. It doesn't look real.
It looks fake because of the size of it. Because the engine size looks. Oh, I see the rockets. I see the side ones.
Yeah, and you can see pictures of it. They have people welding it pre-launch. This is put in perspective, but even from afar, you can just in the perspective to see the cranes behind it, how big that thing is. And it's so they suppose they're gonna do a test where it's gonna go suborbital. I think that's coming up in the next. They want to do it in Q4, but yeah.
That doesn't even look the same as the renderings.
Well, it's they don't have the nose cone on it. Very good point. And I think the fairings might not be on the bottom. But yeah, it literally looks like, I think it reminds me like a water tower. You saw that.
It does. It does.
And I
look
saw
like
that
a
go
water
up. I'm
tower.
like, oh, someone photoshopped it, as a joke, and no, it's real. So amazing. And the most amazing thing on this, when the ship gets built, I think the estimated cost is $2 million, which, you think of the rockets that were flown back 3 years ago. I think the average cost was $500 million for a rocket they've been building for 2 decades. So just, the innovation happening there is just tremendous.
I'm excited. And you know what? There's the thing I like about Elon Musk, and everyone's like, oh, it's so hard to be an Elon Musk or whatever it is. The thing I like about him is that he made his money. Like, there are so many wealthy Silicon Valley people, right? Or just people that have generated wealth over time. But the thing that makes him interesting is he didn't stop. He's like, well, now what can we do? Yeah. Like, what can I do with this now? So I'm like,
and he bet the farm on each time he put all of his money in. And
he always went 110% every single chance he had. And that's like such a flag to wave for like being number one, right?
And if you're thinking about investing it, in the company, he's got his own skin in the game. And I think that's it's one of the, I think, biggest indicators to an investor is, if the person's putting all their same assets in it, they're obviously invested with you, and it's a great sign.
Oh yeah, I bought a lot of Tesla stock pretty early at different points, and I did it because I read Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Richard Branson. I read like their life stories because I was interested in how these billionaires think, and in which parts of their personalities I like, from each of them, so I can create my own self and own version of what I think success looks like. But they all keep going. They don't stop, and and that's why I'm always asking myself, like, what's the next thing you can do? Or whenever I want to give up, I refuse to let myself do it.
And that aspiration, that end goal, which is obviously they must be constantly updating it, but the thing that's the really compelling goal to get to.
Yeah, like the one thing I've heard from a lot of different successful people about like regret and things of that nature, is they always get their goal. Almost always, the situations they get their goal and they're like, it should have been a bigger goal. It should have been a harder goal because then it would have taken me longer. And then you find people that achieve their goals and they're lost because they don't know how to set new goals. And that's why you get like the celebrities that kill themselves and things like that. They get depressed and lost and they don't have anything that they're going after. But this is a good topic conversation. So like, what's your goal right now with Proterra?
It's thank you for asking me, because it's part of it is continuing to innovate faster, that innovation cycle, because we're getting a lot of great feature requests from customers, and now it's a matter of how fast can we do it. And it's a competitive market everywhere, and trying to stay on top of that is a number one goal. And then that's an internal goal, but the outside goal is to help customers on the journey, trying to keep that view of their side, and keeping it a very clear path going forward for how they get to cloud, how can they best manage it. And that's what we've been doing for years, but it's that challenge of how can we scale that to hit more opportunities, more customers, and help them more. And that's where I think the grand challenge is. It's like, okay, we've done 2 or 3 dozen of these migrations, these type, how can we get it to 300? And it forces you, like you just said nicely, about you have to have a very big audacious goal, this goal that let's not do it just how can we do scale at 3, but how can you scale 100 times? And as I like Pierre Diamandis, I read a lot of his books. He talks about exponential thinking. To do this really crazy goal, you just got to think differently. We can't, it's not a matter of just training people differently. Obviously people are a huge factor and they will continue to be, but there has to be better tools and a better method. And so, that's where it gets exciting, because it's every day is, you try to figure out how can we do it better, and how can we iterate on that? And then part of it's the process, and how can we get smarter at a better process, or if there's better tools out there to do it better. So that's what keeps me focused, at least now. And I should also say, that's from a CTO role, is that, but also just from a business perspective, customer satisfaction, just never to lose sight of that piece. That's, it's really easy for me to get really locked in my little world and get, geek out and like the tech. It's a very important piece, but I naturally, in the business world, I'm more employee centric, like that. You see, being a tech person, I was on support a lot. I wanted to have a company where when people were on vacation, they weren't called, and we're trying to make that life on the weekends much easier, less of a strain. And that still is a big focus. And Dean, my business partner, has helped me understand, having that other perspective, the additional perspective, not other, but the additional. They're both very, very important. Essentially important is that the customer focus, that customer sat piece. And that's something that my natural tendency is more employee internally focused in the IT and the technology, but it's the customer sat. And we built a great team. I think that's one piece we haven't really talked about that, but to be aware of your weaknesses. You naturally are always going to tend to go to your strengths, and mine is more tech, more I'll have software fix it. And that's where I'm even more focused on that. Okay, here's a problem, business process, we can put in software and improve it, but also keep that focus on the customer always. That, that's, at the end of the day, that's why we're in business, is to keep the value for customers. And so that's where I constantly remind myself of those. So those are the big
Yeah,
goals.
of course. So that 300 goal, that's like a integer based goal that you guys are trying to hit.
Yeah. It is. It's the interesting thing too I love about our company is that we're cloud agnostic. So there's some partners that really focus on, if you're going to do cloud, you have to go with AWS or you have to go to Azure. And I love the perspective that we try to stay cloud agnostic, because if a customer truly has a place they want to run, they can choose. And so the indirect answer there, what I'm going to, is that we have goals for each cloud, and every cloud provider obviously has goals that they want us to work towards. So that those numbers would be for each cloud specifically. Yep, yep. To grow it and keep our company exciting, good place to work at. So
That's what you want, right? Because you
absolutely,
get to spend so much time here. It's got to be at least like a fun place to work. And then I think another interesting thing is
right.
changing the organization to keep yourself interested, right? Like
Yes,
allowing the organization to move in a different direction because your interest lies in a different direction too. Like I think it's really important to be on fire and excited about what you're doing. So I've had to make a number of changes with the podcast because, around 100 episodes, I was like, this is amazing. And then 150 and then 200. And I was like, how do I keep it interesting? And like, how do I keep myself like really excited about doing this? And definitely not the person to like hide stuff away. And like, I tend to like deal with stuff as quickly as possible. Like the moment I'm not interested, it's like, oh, this is a huge problem. How do we fix this? And then we found, it's like structuring topics for the show, finding amazing guests like you, right? Like getting really, really into the content. And now we're starting to build resources. So this is something I don't think I've talked about this yet. So we made
I noticed you had an application, right, for training teams, and that's more of IT teams, developer teams. Is that right?
software. Yeah. So we did leader bits,
Yeah.
leadership development for technologists. And we actually failed at that a little bit. Like it works. We have customers, it's there. But as far as it being on like a steady incline right now, it's kind of like on ice, to be honest with you, to be direct. We have a number of customers on it. But what happened was we took a B2B sales model. Oh, so yeah, you're a founder. You'll appreciate this. So we started to get some early traction, and then we found out that our sales process is like 9 months, right? So
Right.
that their good deal size is like $30,000 to $50,000, but it'd take like
Right.
9 months.
Right. Which is
Well,
typical. That's our sales cycle, six
yeah,
to 12 months.
yeah.
Right.
So we weren't prepared for that financially. So people love the product. The product's made. The product's out there. It's being serviced. We have customers. But what happened was when like summer of last year, we looked at our cash and we said, we can't support this. We don't have enough runway. Like the product's working, customers are happy. We sign like household names and things like that. Like we just don't have enough runway to let these next months go by.
Right.
Um, and that was partly getting like the team dialed in and everything. But then we
Yeah.
found that people wanted do paid advertising for the podcast because we were booked up so much in advance. So we said, all right,
Right.
well let's start doing. Let's stop ignoring the money and telling them no, and start being like, okay.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then
Right.
that worked out like then the revenue within 3 months overtook the revenue of the leadership thing. And so then we're just like more salespeople, just keep adding more
And
salespeople until it doesn't work.
and the repurposing what you built. That application. It looks like that could, training across the board, it could be used for. So
Oh yeah.
even if you truly think there's not a market there, or you don't want to support that sales cycle, which is quite different, quite lengthy, that all that software you could reuse. I know you know that. So, but I like your point about rework, because that's another lesson I learned sort of the hard way, because I was talking to our dev team, our developer, director of development, and we had an item that we didn't do proper design at the beginning, and about 2 months after we released it, we figured out we have to redo it. And so we're talking as dev meetings go, is like, here's the feature, do you understand it? And he said, I just want you to be aware that, the developers are probably going to take this hard because, they spent a lot of time on this, and we're going to have to rework it. We're going to have to, the redo is not going to go over nicely. And he continued to explain, it's like, it's even a question of leadership, because they're like, if we're designing this stuff, working hard, are we even on the right path here? Are you taking us to the right place? And I didn't even think of it from that perspective. I'm like, yeah, that is a great lesson for me to learn. First of all, it's stayed with me a long time. So we've done, I think, a fairly good job of making sure the development is going to be permanent, I'll say, do our very best in design, so we have to rework it. But it sounds like with that app you've already built, it probably can be retranslated to another learning app, for something, so you can use it again, and that you capture the future, the investment you did previously.
Yeah, and we're always learning, right? So I would say the most amazing things came out of that, and where we're at right now is we're like, let's continue to push the podcast forward, and then we have specific revenue markers we're looking at. And we said, all right, well, when we get to this point, which today we think will be about March next year.
Yeah.
So we think in about March next year, we'll have enough cash to build a team, 2 or 3 salespeople, and sustain the 8-month sales cycle, because it's a great product and people love it. And it's really, really useful it was built out of people like requesting it.
Right.
They were like, oh, I heard this advice from this leader. Like, how do I get my team to take action on it? And then we're like, I don't know, let's figure it out.
Yeah. And what about putting them on YouTube even? Is that something that the broadcast, put it on podcasts, put it in multiple formats? Is that something that you could do in the future?
So we actually, this goes on YouTube.
Oh, it does. Good. Awesome.
Yeah,
I've only looked on the podcast because I've heard the term. So that's, to me, it's funny. And that's excellent, because I have to I've only looked at searching through the podcast on iOS. The funny thing is I remember the very day that Google bought YouTube, and I thought, that is the stupidest thing ever, that no one's going to, no one wants to see other people sing. Because at the time there's a big copyright issue, which it's gotten improved over time. But the idea that, they're going to have all these original creators, it just, to me, I just couldn't comprehend that. And to exacerbate or extend that even further, the gentleman, there was 4 founders of YouTube. One of them went to the school, it's probably 5 miles from my house, very interestingly. So, but yeah, and that's how I probably watch more YouTube now to get information than I do of watching TV or any source of information, like streaming it. So it's amazing how, it's just amazing how any how-to you do now, you don't go to the internet to read an article, you watch the how-to. And I think that just naturally, and that's part of what the documentary is called, Social Dilemma. That's the one. It came out, I think, this week. It played at Sundance, it said, but that's what they go into, is the references. So just organically, people that are interested in tech are going to find your show. I won't call it a podcast, but the show on YouTube. That's excellent.
We didn't do, it started out as we just put the streams up, and then we were like, nah, because it would just be 2 faces statically on the screen. So then we made a push to like take our most popular episodes based off of our, listening analytics, and use that as the prioritization. And we'd actually go in there and edit the episode where there'd be like this interesting part up at the front, and then it's going back and forth between the speaker spaces as they're talking.
Right.
And then we had, a role assigned at the company to put out 1 episode a week of that. Right. Because for me personally, I love the Joe Rogan podcast, but I have never listened to it through the podcast app. I just I watch them on YouTube.
Right.
Yeah. It's great.
Yeah. It's true. Same. Yeah. That's great. I'll check them out there. I've been only watching on podcasts, so listening.
Yeah.
Which I do. It's funny. I do have an appreciation, though. I didn't listen to a lot of podcasts, but I find myself, when I do have downtime at work where I'm doing email or, doing some of the design, I'll put them on to listen to. So that's actually how I've listened to most of yours. So that's great to hear that it's now on YouTube.
Did you like any of them?
Absolutely. I mean, to me, it's like I said, when I heard the role I was transitioning into and what it covered, I didn't really understand. I didn't know if it was the role of like a CIO. And so the discussion, Dean and I were talking about, what I should be focusing upon. He said, well, the role that really you should gravitate into is as a CTO. And so that's when I started looking at what does that even mean? What's that role? Because my definition, or the responsibilities I had up to that time were as a consultant and application manager and then infrastructure manager. So more on the IT per se piece. So that path was probably maybe natural to a CIO, where you understand the process, understand the systems and the compliance in that aspect. The CTO. So I wish all this information existed, when I was identified that that's the next piece.
Why don't you tell me real quick? Because I do this a lot. I don't think I've ever done it on the podcast, but why don't you tell me real quick, like the size of the company and how many people you have in engineering, and then I'll give you like my thoughts.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, 22 years in, we are based in Chicago. So our exec team is reports through here, although we haven't, like I said, been in the office for the last 6 months now. Been in our basements or in our kitchens around the country. We have offices in Europe. So we have a large service center in Athens, Greece. So Dean, my business partner, is Greek. He grew up there. So we've had a really great tie to start the business, start an office there. And that's been since 2013. We've had our largest service center in Greece. And then a few years ago, we've also opened a service center in India, and a great team over there. We're building great resources, in India and in Greece. So we're still, adding to the team. We're right now, for employees, about 120. We'll probably get to 150 this year. We're hiring aggressively in all regions. Again, our focus is around SAP space, yet we're seeing more and more interest for non-SAP systems. So doing the migrations in whole, even data center moves. So one of our biggest customers we just moved is a company called Longevity. They are a chemical manufacturer in the East Coast, and moved them to the Azure cloud. So that was over 600 servers. So that's a quite a lengthy project, not lengthy project, but large project, just from a size perspective. And then previous to that, we did another migration for Tidewater, which is very interesting. They do off site drilling, which is that whole industry has been really challenged the last few years with the price of oil. So a lot of innovation on putting all of their applications, digitizing everything, digitizing the business processes, making everything paperless. So they've done cost savings for the last 5 years, over $65 million with all the consolidation and improvements in IT. So those have been areas we've been focusing upon. So we continue to focus on, like I said, the SAP space, but also managed service and hosting in the cloud, and managing SAP and those other applications as best can be done.
And then what are the top? Like if you take your schedule, imagine it as a pie chart, and you slice it up into 3 slices. What are the biggest 3 slices? Biggest 3 ways you spend your time on a daily basis?
Yeah. The one slice I don't spend enough time on, I would love to just snap my fingers and spend more time on, is the design, because that's where it's the investment in the future. So that the new features, talking to the dev team. Our dev team is located in Greece, so it's the time shift. So the morning starts there, and first few hours going through the sprints, going through features. We have 2-week sprints. So we right now are on a monthly release schedule. So we do those 2 sprints, and we're always planning out, 2 weeks in advance. So this morning we're actually planning out the next release for what would be for November.
That's where you want to spend your time, but where's the 3 areas you spend your time?
So the other area is around, I would say, customer exec management. So things where really large customers, so helping bridge process where it's exactly like you mentioned about business processes, things that escalations, a large part, we have a few very large migrations right now going on. And it's funny, it's like, it's Pareto's law. It's like, the 20% that affects 80% of the problems, right? What we have when we do these migrations, it's not the core systems. That is challenging, but we've baked that well enough. That's become very risk-free and proceduralized. The problem we have, and we spend the vast amount of intellectual energy on, I think, is the remote sites. So they're we're commonly taking sites from a company. Some companies, they'll have for whatever reason, they're going to carve out a piece of their business. Company we're working with now is a healthcare manufacturer. So they're going to carve out a part of their business, specific product lines and such, and they're going to build a new business off that. The challenge is, if you think of the pie chart, all the applications, if you think of it like the concentric circles, you're going to hit every circle. So we have the complexity where we have to take every app, but they might only use a piece of the app, but you still have to bring everything over. And then it's all the networking and all the technologies, the desktops and such, where basically you have to retrofit those sites to work in the new system, new landscape, new company. So think of it as like the new business services that we have to figure out manually how to do it, and then how do we build the processes, and then ultimately how can we put in software. So it's sort of like that's like the next set of problems focusing on now. So that's been a large portion of my last 2 months, is that piece. So that steals from the design side. And then part of it is some of the business admin piece, just being an owner in the company, just making sure customer sat for all customers is where it needs to be. Helping the team, I'm another resource. I've worked with both teams, the delivery team, so the SAP management team, executive, or the application team and the infrastructure team. So helping if there's, we have a new kind of connection we need. For example, we're instituting a new way we do automation in FlexBridge. How are we going to build the server that's going to connect to all these secure customer locations? So how do we best do that? Make sure it's secure and compliant, and don't break rules along the way. So focusing on those pieces. So I'd say that's a good 25% of the other effort. And then the other piece is around sales. So I'd say that's probably the other 25% is helping assist pre-sales, doing demos of the solution, assisting, doing demonstrations of, who the company is. It's sort of at this point, it's around those 4 areas. But I would love if I could spend more time on the design, just to, that's where I think my natural abilities lie, and I think that's an area where I can move the needle the most. But it's you don't get your way, I guess, right? You got to focus on the other areas of the business which are vitally important also.
It depends, though, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of there's always going to be some things that you're going to have to do that you don't want to do. Right. So we have to get that fairy tale out of our head that it's always going to be perfect. Yeah, right. But that being aside, that doesn't mean that we can't optimize it for more palatable situation. Right.
Right.
So I always think that the company needs you to do the thing that to either do 2 things. Fine. One, the things that no one else can do because you're an owner. So that's like a default role. You have to do the most difficult things that either are unknown or people don't know how to do. It's Elon Musk says it's staring into the abyss and eating glass, right? He's never getting to work on what he wants. He's always working on the biggest problem. So you've got that as part of your portfolio. The things I don't want to do, that's going to take up, the 30-year time. And you've got the sales, the business admin, all these types of things. And then you have the things that you want to do. And then you have the things that you want to do, but you're good at them. You're skilled at them. And you know that when you're doing that, you can get into your flow, you're on fire when you're doing that. Yeah. The company definitely needs you to be doing that because you're an owner and no one is going to care and have as much passion as the owner who's on fire about what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Right. Because anything's possible. Right. At that point in time.
True. So, and I'll add to that just the iteration part of it. It's an exponential factor. So, it's if you think of the curve, the fact that you have to get to that higher part of the curve to get to the next higher part. And that's where it gets a little, I'll say even frustrating, where you got to be spending time in that piece and you're not. You get frustrated with yourself. I have, you got to make time to make sure you follow that. I'm sorry.
No, please. This is your episode, my friend. What I do, so I got this advice from one of my investors, and so shout out to Andy. But we were sitting down having a difficult conversation once, 2 years ago, and we put a recurring event in my phone that triggers once every 3 months, and it, in the evening it triggers, and it says revisit Andy's list. And there's notes in my calendar event, and it asked me, am I happy about what I'm doing and how I'm spending my time? Am I on fire about it? Am I being the best version of myself for the company? Things like that. And it's basically just has these reflective questions that I ask myself. And inevitably every 3 months when that ticks up, I'm uh, learning something new by asking those questions over and over. And I would say what I hear from you, and I definitely don't want to be like giving advice or anything. I just like
No,
as from human to human, like what
it's
comes through
always
my
open
head.
to feedback. That's
Yeah,
one of my
yeah.
core beliefs.
It sounds like when you were talking about like the customer executive management, like remote site thing that was taking up a lot of your time. It sounded like that would be the lowest hanging fruit for you to find like an expert, like go find like an author in that area or somebody that you like really respect and then hire them. I mean, look, you're at 120 employees. You've got funds to hire people. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? You and I
Right.
both know that, right?
Yep.
So it's
Yep.
just about the focus and making it your mission and making it that thing that's on your to-do list every day when you wake up. Like for me, right now, it's a marketer. I'm waking up every day. I have 3 or 4 interviews this week. I'm just going to keep interviewing people and learning until I find the person that is I validate as an expert, but I also want to spend time with, because that's that person I'll end up being able to trust better. And so just spending time finding the person that you trust in that area so that you can put someone there, know it's getting done well, not have to think about it too much, and then go spend the time doing what you want to do.
Right.
Right? Like go
Makes
spend
a
the
lot of
time doing
sense.
more design. And then get this. You want to kick it up a notch and put a cherry on top? Go hire like the best designer to work with you on design and learn from him. As you're getting to do the thing you love, you're getting to learn from like somebody you massively respect or like an author. And that's a dream for me down here at 10, 15 employees. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Right.
I want all
Right.
this money and all this growth. So when we're at 100, 150 people, I can go around and hire all the people that I respect and learn from them and become masters at like different areas, and while also making sure that the business has everything that it needs. But that's one of the beautiful parts about being an owner. Like you've got a CTO at a company with 120 people that was not an owner and was just an employee cannot have the fun and do the things that you're able to do right now. You put in that 10 years with you and your wife so that you can do this type of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a very good point, and that's a very well received advice. And it's we're hiring, we're interviewing, I should say, similar where you're doing the marketing side. I'm looking with a team for that role. It's going to take some time, but same discovery, right? Looking for the right person. But and I've gotten similar advice from we hired a key resource, Alan. I have to give a shout out myself to him. He told me similarly that I spend more time on the design piece because that's a unique area where I can contribute. So, and it's a good, well received advice, and I will take it.
Yeah, I love it because like 99% of the time when I'm going out there and like looking for advice or getting insight, I
Yeah,
already kind of know the answer. I just
yeah,
want to validate it and hear it from other people that don't have like a dog in the race so I can make sure like objectively it's a good move.
yep. And also, yeah, it's the second objective, and also just I find myself when you describe a problem or describe something period, you learn a lot about it yourself. Like it's like when you're going through the verbalization, like describing it, you learn a lot, even when you have to articulate and describe the issue. So just I think that in itself, even the aside from getting the feedback from the other person, but talking through it, because you sort of formulate, maybe it's how our brains work getting in development, where you got to conceptualize and break things down into simpler pieces. It helps help us problem solve, I guess.
Yeah, that's what we actually found with the show too. So when we'll look for a guest, um, and we have this pitch list meeting where people like our team pitches us people we want to talk about. One of the items that's part of that formula of like ranking that pitch list is whether or not they have content online, because we have found time and time again people who are required to constantly translate their thoughts into written. You're doing it already because you have your business partners and everything like that, and you have to do it. But other people that will like write and share blog posts and things like that and do articles, they have that skill. It's just a higher skill. They just have like they're just they have spent time at it. It's like one of the
So,
indicators. It's
right.
not
Yeah.
all that matters, but
No, I think it is a good indicator, absolutely, that you can build content and be able to write. It's a skill within IT, within technical people, if they can formulate and communicate their ideas clearly. not
Yeah,
just
that's
verbally,
what.
but also to document it, write it down.
Yeah, like one of my favorite plays is finding authors I respect on a subject and then contacting them, and either I'd say 9 times out of 10 I don't end up working directly with them, but they know the person. They know who I need better than I know who I need, because they just get that same stuff all day, and they have their network, and they're like, you need to go to that person for 100 different reasons, but that's the person you want. So
Mm-hmm.
that's like a
Find them.
go-to. I've never shared that before either, but it's like one of my favorite strategies to do, because
Yeah,
when you can read their stuff and you know how they think, you can qualify them as an expert without ever even talking to them.
sure. Well, you said it in your book, writing the book. That's basically you're getting that person's experience or life experience in that area, which is
Yeah.
yeah,
I feel like when some people left like a bad review, they're like, it's not worth $9.99 or whatever it was. I was like, they're like, because, and their justification was the length of the book. And I'm like, that's not a bug, that's a feature. Like me consolidating it down to just these
absolutely.
few points. If I took
Yep.
10 years of experience and consolidated it down to a 3 hour read, that should cost more than a 20-hour read.
Well, and I also think people's attention span is that short now. I think having a shorter book is much better, more appreciated. It's going to get a wider acceptance.
Right? Because most people,
Yeah.
they'll read the book and
Yeah.
they'll do a reading session and then kind of put it down.
Right.
So if you can get through like 80% of it in a reading session, then boom.
Yeah. It was probably a bot anyway. So the review.
Dude, Patrick, this is great, man. I'm gonna put you, like, we gotta have you back next year.
Yeah.
Because I want to like follow up with,
Yeah.
you know,
I'll tell
if
you
you,
about how I spend my time.
it better be design. You better
It
be in a
better be.
design
I'll bring
studio.
graphics.
Yeah, it should look like, instead of a
Yeah.
music studio, it should look like a design
Yeah. It's funny
studio.
because next time I'll have all the shows. Yeah. Social Dilemma. That's the one I couldn't remember. It's interesting. It's has some good points in it. I think you probably had all the same thoughts and you've seen it, but it's always interesting to see the current state of what we do.
Yes. Yeah, no, this is great, man. I really enjoy you. I see, this is the thing. Before, with the podcast, it'd be like, this is great. I'll be out in Chicago in 2 months. Let's get lunch then. But I haven't been able to do that.
Right. Yeah. Who knows
So
when it's going to get back to normal? That's the big question, right?
yeah, we're thinking that when it does get back to normal, um, probably with the vaccine and stuff, we're thinking that we're going to try to push the show in the direction of like having people come here, like
Oh, that's
flying
cool.
them down, and maybe not every episode, but we want. I've gotten to do like 2 or 3 in person in my life, and it's really great. And so we were thinking, all right, that would be like a next level for us. We'll fly people down, do the show with them here in the studio, and like, because this is like a 3,000 square foot studio here.
Right.
So we're gonna end up like decorating it and putting cool, like I kind of want to make like a little get a bunch of old technology and like new technology, and kind of like have a little show and tell going on out
You
there.
got a good start already.
Yeah.
I like your decorating. I have an idea. So
Yes.
out of your book, you have these problems, things you have to know as a CTO or problems, but it could be quite interesting where you had a forum where, you could do it virtually at least. You have this problem, you could see how different people react with the same kind of issue, morale issue in a person, blah, blah, blah. And you actually just see how, because, bringing all those experiences together could be quite interesting as a teaching tool. And, we all have different perspectives, different cultures. That's one thing we didn't talk about a lot. And I think a lot about, and it's not so much maybe the CTO role, but as a business owner is the culture and, what you build in the company and what naturally gets created. I think that's a really interesting topic. So for future discussion.
Yeah, definitely. I actually just made a note of it. Yeah, so wait, I don't know. I don't even understand my own notes. You ever do that? You make a
Yeah,
note and
too much. Too
mine
much.
says problem, different people react, same type of issue. I don't know what I was saying there.
So yeah, like for example, you brought up in the book, do you build it yourself? Do you partner? That's something we early on, and we had so one of the features we had was to build a project plan, put a project plan integration into the software. And we were working on this right when Alan, who I just gave a shout out to, on the team, and he said, why would you build this? There's so many other features that are going to be unique to the product. Just get something. If there's a product already that equally does what you want, just integrate that, put that in the software, partner with it, So that was a big insight. And it's interesting to see, real life examples of how people react to that and what happened. So
that's actually really good feedback. We're working on right now. We haven't really talked about it yet, but this thing called the index. So what we did was we took every time people give good insight, we mark it in our notes because Jake and Adam are listening, and we make these like little clips, and we were using those clips for leader bits, right? And putting like leadership challenges behind them. But then we were thinking, while that's on hold, let's do like a premium thing, call it index. And we took all these clips. They don't have challenges behind them, right? Because that's like unique to leader bits, but it's just like the 2 or 3 minutes of advice from different people on different topics. And we came up with like 20 different categories, from culture to hiring to all of these different, difficult conversations. And then you can go into that category and see all the clips and insights from all the past guests. So there's like thousands of these things. So if you want to know about, hiring, you can go there and you can see, oh, NASA doesn't like this, different companies do it like that, or here's 3 things to think about. Try to get people some context around like how to think about problems. But what you just said about like how people react to different types of issues, I think that would fit in. I think there's a place for that, like in the index, because if we're under culture, we were talking about doing like an FAQ, like people ask a question, but being able to track that and say like, all right, culture, there was bad culture, and then like, this is what happened, or they went and tried this, and these sort of little stories, how different people react with the same type of issue. I think that'd be really valuable.
And it's like, again, you mentioned in the book about how you test software. You model it, you test it iteratively, and it's not only your variables different. Here's different actions, and it's performed in different places by different people, and it's interesting. It's almost like taking a scientific approach to how you'd apply this problem that a CTO could see. It's interesting. So
yeah, that scientific
put them
methodology, it's given us it's how we're bouncing light around the planet right now, talking to each other.
Right. Right. There's things that do work and things that don't work. And maybe there's many things that work, but it'd be interesting, because I think in the forum where it's interactive, I think it'd be quite interesting instead of, reading it. So good stuff.
That's really good feedback. Yeah. I was actually thinking about on the second book, using the second book to promote like this living, and now I'm calling it a living index, thanks to you. So it's like, it's got to be this index where like people can come and experience around these ideas and hear what great people say. And it's almost very similar to leader bits, but it's actually, what's interesting is like, it's all kind of blending together. You got my mind thinking, Patrick.
No, I have a term for that. Maybe I heard it from somewhere. I call them converging goals or converging ideas, where that's where it's beautiful, where you can knock off a bunch of things at the same idea, same solution. And that's where in the early days when you're, it's like you have 2 developers and it's like, okay, I can get this feature and it's going to take them a month to get it. And then, so you're looking at, okay, maybe there's this one feature is going to knock off 4 things. So we'll do that first. So, and those are things, thankfully, those are distant memories, but, I do appreciate the thinking, when it's that situation and taking the lesson, let's say that, don't forget the lesson learned. So,
yeah, no, this is good. Yeah. It helps with our objective, because we don't want people to like repeat the same mistakes. We don't want people to have to wait for, an educational institution to print another textbook, or wait for an author to go through their year or 2 long editing cycle. What I want to get like as close to the metal as possible. Like, I talked to the, Zoom CTO or CIO, Harry, about their transition through COVID, right as it was all happening. And it's like, let's take some of his advice and extract that out and push that out to everybody as quickly as possible, so they can get it within, essentially real time, within hours of him giving some insight on a specific topic. You can have that versus waiting for that longer cycle.
It's needed. I mean, the cycle, I mean, our, Illinois shut down, what was it, like the second week in March? And that next Monday, we had a tremendous uptick in just virtual desktop usage from our customers and needing it. They had to build it, within hours. So you're right, that information needs to be timely, especially in our role. So.
Boom. All right. Best piece. Let's wrap it up with the best piece of leadership advice you ever got.
Leadership advice. Interesting. I'd say, the one thing that we had interns, always come in and they ask general advice. I'll say this first, and I think I never heard anyone say it, but it was an observation I learned in my first job is like, if you're looking at the clock, that's not the job for you. And I've never since that first job ever, you lose track of time. And that's, I think that's, if I could give anyone good advice, that's I think the best advice I could give to anyone starting a career is that if you're looking at the clock trying to figure out how much your days left, you got to get out of that work. And maybe it's not the career, maybe it's not the place to work, but I think that observation has helped me a lot. And so I share that with the interns, and I got to follow up with them. So we'll see if it served them well. Best leadership advice? My gosh, I got to think through that. There's so many ideas that have been shared with me. What the very best one? My gosh, I mean, I don't know if it's something I've learned, but I just would say, it's part of it is just being, be your true self and be honest. And I think, it's, being forthright with people, and, specifically for leadership for CTO. I mean, you have to have these requirements already, natural curiosity, be ambitious, have that somewhat business capabilities, right? I would consider myself not a strong business person. I don't have that aptitude. I'm much more in the creative, more technology geek side, but I've partnered with a person that is really strong in the business side. So that overcame my weakness. So I'd say, I'd say the best advice is, try to be self-critical, learn and about yourself as much as you can. I think that's a very great attribute of getting older. I think it's probably the only thing better about getting older is that you learn a lot about yourself. And I'd say if those people, I'm almost 50 now, when you get in your 40s, if you haven't learned a lot about yourself, then you're not being very self-introspective. And then, so to be a good leader, you really have to understand, maybe this is the advice here, is that, you got to build that team, and that team has to be well balanced. You have to complement your weaknesses. You have strengths to cover those weaknesses. Let your strengths, naturally resonate, and make sure that, the team can, know clear direction and where they're going, and try to keep them, on task and focused, and hopefully can have a little fun or a lot of fun while you're doing it. So I don't know, maybe that's not what boilerplate one statement, but I think at least that's what resonates in my mind. If I was going to say, this is what I see as important and what I try to start my day with, and when I interact with team members, that's what I try to, give them the impression that's what I'm thinking of, at least.
Boom. Mic drop. That was amazing.
That might be the longest answer. I apologize. I'm not good at short statements, so something I could work on.
You know what?
I'll hire someone that has good at short statements.
Come be a scribe at Protera. No, the best answers are the real answers. It doesn't need to be short and quippy. It just needs to be you.
Yeah. And it's something I really value. And that's something I wanted to bring to this session, is that I want it to be original, and not to say it's right. I'm just saying that I want it to be, I didn't want to, because I think my path might be a little non-traditional as a CTO or the developer. I want to be a developer, but I know I can't spend time there. And so my the thing that being a business owner, you think you have to have an MBA, you think there's a right way to do it. And as long as you can understand there's other people that you can have help you, you can complement where you cannot naturally do it well. And I think that's something I don't hear that enough, actually. I mean, to me, the other thing that my past's been atypical, is 22 years in, where you read a lot of these success stories, and it's, people see, in 4 years, I got to be at this point. And it's not been my path. And I don't think it's like white lightning when that happens. It's so rare. And that's what we as humans like to focus on, that, Facebook was built and had 1 billion users within 10 years or whatever this crazy thing was, which is impossible to replicate. But it's the journey of just every day looking to become a little better in yourself and your team, and helping others, and, have an honest approach to that, looking for the long term, wanting to be here for the long term, not having that, I'm got to be in business for 3 years, because that mentality, you're probably gonna do a lot wrong, with partners and employees. Even if you have that really short-term mentality that you're gonna get in and get rich and get out, it's that building it slowly but correct. And if you want to bootstrap, which I don't know how common that is for the people you talk to, but that's been what I'm more financially conservative, and so is my business partner. So that's been the right path for us up to now. So that's important to me. And I think there's people like me out there that is their path. And I want to say that, that path is legit too. And it works. And it's, it might not be as common. You don't hear that as much, but the slow and steady and conservative path does work still. It takes you a lot longer. So,
Yeah.
But
and
that said, we are on the exponential curve, and the growth we've experienced in the last 2 years has probably, I haven't looked at the numbers, but it probably has supplanted the first 20. Right. And that's the exciting part, is now we're finally in that startup mode. And it's the exciting part. You think of these next chapters in your life. I'm almost 50, and I'm more excited about our business and our future than ever. And that's a gift. It's a gift thanks to the people I work with, and, how things have happened. And some of it's chance. Luck is a big part of it. You can plan as much as you can, but events happen as they do. And so anyway.
I was never a lucky person.
Yeah.
Or I never saw myself as a lucky person, or really felt like I experienced luck until I started working very, very hard. And it really is I love cliches because they're true. If you need some truth, go look at what people hate hearing.
Right.
Usually that's the truth, and it's usually a cliche, and you can usually bet your dollar on that.
That's a great
that's
point.
real, right?
It's real, right? Because it's the
But
truth.
it's a weird process too, about paths and journeys and becoming something, because it's almost like, as much as I hate on the get rich quick people type deal, that sparkle, or that idea of
Right.
financial independence, that idea of this stuff, can get a lazy person to do work for a short period of time. And then what happens is you kind of you'll work for me, I'd have an idea, work for a short period of time, kind of give up on it. Have an idea. This was when I was 11. I kind of figured it out around 18, but I have this idea, give up, and it's like fireworks. It's like sizzle, right? Oh, I'm going to be rich. Oh, it's going to be great. But then you run out of energy from that. But then the big change that happened in me is I realized at one point that I have to make myself better in order to work harder longer, because I'm so frustrated with all my failed attempts that I need to have the success now. I've tried so many times, and I can't just give up. That'd be the worst thing. And so clearly this is going to take way longer than I thought, but the next 30 years goes by anyways. Exactly. And I would rather just but then what happens is, so you convince yourself to do something difficult and work a little bit harder. And then you feel good, and you're just oh, this is how life works. I do difficult things and I get a reward. I do this thing, I push myself, I grow, I go farther than I think I can. And I get this little hit, this little reward. And then it becomes well, how far can I go? Right? It's because it's only difficult. It's like lifting weight. It's only painful, or hard, right when you're doing it. Right. And then you just kind of have to get over that hump and push yourself. And then you start reading other people and how they're doing it. And you're whoa, it's not that hard to become the top 1%. You just have to do the hardest things in the world all the time and push yourself every day. And then you're okay, yeah, from here, I see it now, after incrementally having done that for a better part of a decade. But if I were to go back and try to talk to myself and explain it, it's just I wasn't mature enough. I didn't understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep going. And, to try to apply an example, I'm trying to think in my mind, think of the app that you've already built. And there's so many things, there was an amazing quote about a month ago. It was from Jim Cramer from Smart Money. What is his show? Fast Money, I think. And I rarely watch it, but it happened just that day. And he had a segment on how retail is changing because of COVID. And he said, the comment was, and he was quoting an analyst. He said, 5 years of technological advancements happening in 3 months. And where I'm going is that things are changing so quickly in our field that who knows what is the next need. And just being, you just got to be there when it happens is really important, and being aware of where the opportunity is going to pop. And who knows, these things you've already built, they may have another second life for this next opportunity, and you're uniquely positioned for it. There's a quote I listen to. I hear this a lot. I think about a lot, and it's funny. Bruce Springsteen. Obviously he's probably a favorite singer for many people, and he's been around longevity forever. And he said, he didn't get a lot of awards through his career, and I think he ultimately got like an American Music Award or something, or Grammy. And he said, I guess if you stick around long enough, you get one of these. And it's always stuck with me, because it's like, you can go out for that. And this guy, in looking back at 1900s, for music, he's going to be one of the top musicians, right? But even he felt like he was sort of underappreciated, and he didn't make enough of a mark. And his message was just keep going. And so I think a lot about that, because it's like I feel a responsibility to our team that there's success in that the product is successful, aside from the financial part, but more just that I say that the term the moment in the sun, because you work a lot on something and you want it to be successful, you want it to be creating value. And so that's the the end goal. When I said customer sat in that, I would even turn that into the internal use for the team, so the team can see that all this hard work, this design, it went to something that really created value for people. So that's something I sort of lock in my brain, and sometimes that comes out when you think that gosh, where are we going and how long is it going to take to get there? I think those are thoughts that creep in your mind at time to time.
Yeah, and you're in a great position too, because you have the ability to say, here's what I want, here's the direction I want the company to go. And you can place people strategically within your organization to know that if you do that, you will get that result down the road, while at the same time getting to spend the bulk of your day-to-day life doing something that you're very excited about. And who knows, maybe you hire that person and then you go spend time in design, and you do that for 2 years full time, and all of a sudden now you're really interested in some other part of the business, or maybe a new product line, or you might just, your interest will likely change, because that's just how humans work. And then it's just being aware of that, and that self-awareness, it's so huge, it's so important.
Yep. And having people that will honestly give you good feedback without sugarcoating it, it's important to get to the next level, to really improve yourself. And that's another conversation, because I was having a conversation about an individual that just didn't seem to be willing to change. And I was trying to figure out, I was trying to figure out this key, how to unlock it. And the observation was, there's a lot of people don't want to change. It's sort of most people are like that. The people that want to improve, looking at, how they can, improve their character and how they work is probably more of a rare attribute than more common. And so that helped me understand the situation better, and set my expectations more properly. So
that was a frustrating lesson for me when the day I realized that it's like the most compressed way to say it would be, I can take someone who's running and point them in the right direction, but I can't get someone to run. Like it's like near impossible to get someone to run. But if you have someone who's running, you can point them in the right direction.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And there's another just sort of a comment that blew my mind on that realm is, have these, concerns of, talking about a resource that we wanted to help, improve. And the comment was made, and they probably have the same opinion of what you think. They are as certain as they need a change. They are as certain that there's no problem. And that's really blew my mind thinking of that, because to me it was so obvious this was the problem, and it's clear. Why aren't you figuring this out? And so that really blew my mind to think of it from that realm. And I know it sounds a little obvious, but think of that when you have something really heated and you're really passionate about the answer, and just if you can pause and say, the person I'm talking to probably feels as strong against it or whatever. And it's not going to be, so I don't know. I think of that too, hopefully for the wiser.
Is that person still there?
They are. Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. And and the thing is, and it's the fault's probably more in me than them actually. And it's something I've grown into learning more about, because if you learn about Abraham Lincoln, they said he actually would take his most bitter rival, and he would make him put him on his team because he wanted to have that different views and opinions in his cabinet. And there's a very good book on it. I didn't read it, but I think it's a very acclaimed book in the last 10 years about that topic, where he assembled people that were vehemently against his ideas, and because he thought the best ideas would come from that, because they weren't all seeing the same answer. So I've tried to look at that view, that we all have a semblance of being right. We all have a semblance of being wrong. And it's the more aspirational idea of let's improve it in some, let's work as a team. So I try to remind myself of that. So, but thank you, Joel, for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
I've learned a lot. It's been an awesome exchange. Rarely get to talk like this. So I really have appreciated the exchange of ideas.
No, I'm so glad you let the episode keep going. I think we just beat our record for longest episode. So you won that.
You probably, just trim out all the stuff that took me 5 minutes to describe in 3 seconds.
No, never. That's the best part, my friend.
Wow. Good. Yeah. I'm hopeful.
I want them to be longer. Yeah. I've been trying to encourage people to go longer, because an hour, I noticed in the interview, I get the person will open up fully right at around an hour. Right. And then that's when it's over. And it's no, because media trained people. Well, we'll talk about this next time, but
no, I very much appreciate the chance to exchange the ideas with you, and also just the forum in general. And, I'm definitely I've been listening to podcasts. I read your book. I'm very excited to check out YouTube, because that's typically how I consume all the information. And, just thank you for sharing this, because I wish I had this resource when I learn this is the role I should be doing. And it didn't exist. And I think it's a great guidance and service to helping build this next generation of leaders. And, it's sorely needed. We need our competitive edge, to be able to succeed and, keep technology working for people and improving people's lives.
Oh, thank you so much, my friend. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Joel. And thank you, Jake. I know you're on mute, but thank you for the advice to getting this set up. And Jamesina is still there. She helped get it all set up from our side. She is an amazing marketing resource. So she may have good advice who to talk to.
Well, she helped get you on here. So clearly she knows what she's doing.
She knows how to network and make things happen, but our company's been transformed with her being here. So I can't say enough great things about her. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Thank you, guys.